from here.
All right. I know this is going to excite you guys so much, but today we're going to talk about, we're going to kind of start a series of talking about running our business like a business. And today we're going to talk about taxes and record keeping. I'm sure that many of you guys are scrambling because we're getting to the end of the year. Or if you're not scrambling now, you're going to be scrambling here in a month as you're getting everything ready for taxes. And just wanted to walk you guys through a few things, maybe some tips and things to think about that I do in my business to keep things running like a well-oiled machine the best that we can here. So, full disclosure, my husband's an accountant, so he does a lot of my bookkeeping and a lot of these systems he set up for me. So I, can't take all the credit for being organized. He's been a big piece of that, but it does make our tax time go a lot easier. And I think if for those of you that aren't tracking regularly right now and are kind of doing that end of the year scramble, you'll find if you start off 2025 on the right foot, you're going to have a lot more enjoyable year as it goes. You progress through the year and also be able to breathe a little bit easier at tax time. So you won't have those surprises. So for those of you on the call, if you feel like sharing, feel free to like drop emojis in the chat or reactions. But how many of you guys feel like you have a really good handle on your bookkeeping and accounting practices for your real estate business? If you do, give me a thumbs up. If you feel like there's some work to be done, you can give me a thumbs down or a funky face or whatever. All right. So we've got a little bit of a mix of things going on there. Angela and Alan, I love your. I don't. Oh, perfect. Well, I think the thing is, there's always room to improve. Myself personally, I have a pretty good hold on like our tracking, and yet there are still things I can do better too. So I think if we're not constantly assessing, we're missing the boat too, because things are consistently changing. But one of the most important things, if you aren't keeping track of your business expenses separately, if you don't have separate tracks for your personal and your business, that would be one thing I would highly recommend that you consider doing in 2025. You can't keep track. You can't really be aware of what your expenses are, what you're really truly making, all of that, if you aren't tracking it separately, if you're mixing that and intermingling it. And that's going to be the key to truly making tax time easy, is if you have two separate paths, you have a separate checking account and a separate credit card that is for your business expenses, and all your personal stays, not mingled with your business. It's going to make tracking so much easier. On top of, it's just easier if you ever get audited. But we personally have an LLC. I've had a business before that we did an S Corp where I actually paid myself. Right now, we do it as an LLC, and I just take owner withdrawals out of it as I need to pay myself. But with every commission that you get, you should also have some of that allocated to taxes, because we all know we're going to pay taxes. And you should make sure that you have some of that allocated to reinvesting in your business and not just be paying yourself with every check you get and then scrambling to come up with money for those other expenses or at tax time. How many of you guys are good at keeping track of your receipts, keeping copies of your receipts? Okay. For those of you that keep your receipts, like maybe if you guys don't mind unmuting, what do you guys do with them? Do you keep like physical receipts? Do you use, Ramil's got QuickBooks. What do you guys use? How do you keep track of your receipts, or don't you?
I use YNAB.
White app?
YNAB,
YNAB. Okay, I totally heard that
Y
wrong.
YNAB stands for you need a budget.
Like it, like it.
Same.
You use YNAB too? Might have to check that out.
And I use it for personal accounting and then also the business as well.
Yeah, I know. I was sitting with Angela at dinner the other day, and Angela, I know you use something too that you track both your personal and your business kind of budgeting across both of them. Is that correct?
Um, yes, but it's not very consistent at all. I was
Yeah.
just going to take a picture of my box of receipts.
Yeah.
So,
I think the number one key is to
Beginning of the
find,
new year.
yeah. And I think the number one thing is to find something that you'll use consistently. My process probably could be a little bit cleaner, but for me, I use Google Drive. So I have a folder in my Google Drive that is just receipts. So I can take a picture on my phone and then share it to my Google Drive, select the folder, and it goes in there automatically. Sometimes I don't even do that right when I'm sitting down. Like I always just make sure to take a picture of the receipt. And then once a week, I'll go and I'll throw it into the drive so that I have it. And then in my drive, I have like a dump folder, like at the top that just, that's where I initially dump it into. And then I've got subfolders that will say, the categories, like was it gas, was it marketing, whatever, so that I can divide on those. And I name my files by date and where I spent the money. So it would be like 0101 and then Target. So that way, when I am going back into my accounting system to reconcile everything, if I had a question on what did I spend at Target, like I see this charge and it was on January 1st, I know I just need to click on the 0101 Target receipt and I'm going to see it. So I think that some of the other apps are a little bit more friendly and that you can take a picture and assign it to a category right away. I think either way works. I have ran into a ton of realtors who just keep piles and piles of receipts. They don't store them electronically, and then they're just at the end of the year trying to go through all of that. I think that's probably your worst worst case, because it makes it really time consuming to go through those. If you just take the extra 5 seconds to categorize them, take a picture and categorize it in some sort of way, it is going to make your life so much easier when it comes to tax time. How many of you guys use professional accountants come tax time, and how many of you do your own taxes? I use a professional accountant. Okay. This is a tough decision based on there's so many variables when it comes to, do you have a spouse that has income? Do you have a secondary businesses? Do you have additional forms of income you're making yourself, on, the right choice there? I find having a personal accountant, while it's expensive to have them do your taxes, if you have an accountant that will sit down and tax plan with you, you actually end up saving a lot more money. They're going to be well versed on deductions and different things. Like we sold our properties this year, and we went to him and said, "Hey, how's this going to impact the total of our taxes if we choose to sell these two rental properties?" And had him give us that advice so we understood kind of that end of it. Matt?
My accountant is every year no less than a 5-to-1 return on what it costs for my accountant. Every dollar I have invested into that relationship has saved me that like a 5x in what I would have to pay to the government.
Yep.
Just because I didn't know there's just too much to know. That's not my lane.
Yeah.
So I have to pay for somebody else's times. Like I want to pay for her 25 years of experience. I don't have the time to be up to date with the 33,000 pages of acceptable deductions.
Yeah. It's what we talk about all the time, right? Like what is your kind of stay in your lane? Where's your knowledge and what is your hourly rate? And how much more time would it take you to research all of these codes and loopholes and all of
Don't
that?
FISBO your finances, people.
I love it. Don't FISBO your finances. Yeah, I think having a good accountant is vital. Like the bookkeeping part, you can do yourself. There's lots of tools to be able to do that, but being able to hand your books over to your accountant and say to them, what do I need to do differently next year? Sit down and ask them, like, I mean, my accountant all the time is saying things like, hey, if you want to not pay taxes this year, think about adding these expenses or doing these things. He's just helping you utilize the loopholes that we are all privy to. Taxes are so complicated. So I think a good accountant will help you, reduce your tax liability significantly.
You need to interview accountants because they're also not all created equal. You got some that are ultra conservative, ultra by the book, very black and white. And the thing is in the code, it's not that there's gray area, but there's acceptable and non-acceptable. And some just don't have experience in applying certain things to certain parts of the code. And it's not that it's illegal. It's not that it's shady. They're just uncomfortable with it. So they stick with what they know. It's the same thing as like agents who do regular transactions versus agents that do short sales and foreclosures. It's just a different skill set to be able to help somebody in that capacity. There are some agents that are like, I just don't do short sales and foreclosures. There are some accountants that don't actually help you plan your financing, and like they don't actually help you with wealth creation and strategy, but some do. So interview your people.
Yeah, for
There's
sure.
I've had experiences too where one CPA, she really didn't know anything about real estate and everything that, like, just to kind of piggyback off of what Matt said about interviewing, all the things that can be deductions or how investment, like she just was very much a straight, I'm just going to fill out these forms and get this stuff like to make sure your taxes are filed, which I appreciate because it's more than I know. But then I talked to someone else who's like, well, did you know you can do this, 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 and this, and move this here and set up this here? And now instead of owing $25,000, you're writing a check for 800. And I'm like, oh, I love you. You're my new favorite person right now. So yes, please interview, talk to someone, make sure they know about real estate, and all the benefits that we have.
Yeah. And on the flip side too, I think we're all watching podcasts and different videos, and there's all these tax tips that are being thrown out to you. I'm sure my accountant just rolls his eyes a lot behind the phone conversation because I'm always like, what about this? I saw this. Could we do this? And he's, just having someone to validate so you're not making any errors or assuming that something will work for you. Because not, I mean, my tax situation is different than Audra's tax situation and different than Matt's tax situation. And not every loophole or idea that we have to reduce our tax burden is going to work for all three of us.
One of my favorite questions when interviewing accountants, especially if you have an LLC or run a business, is ask them to explain the Augusta rule to you. And then just sit there and listen. And if you don't know what the Augusta rule is that you can actually rent your house back to your business for your annual meeting for up to a certain amount of days per year. And that's deductible.
And you don't have to pay personal income on that
Correct.
rental
Your
income that your
business
business
can
paid you
rent
either.
out your house as a destination for your annual meeting where you go over your minutes and you plan your budgets, etc., with you and your business partner or your sole LLC, and let them explain the rest of it to you. If your accountant doesn't know how to use the Augusta rule for you, you're talking to the wrong person.
Yep. Exactly.
It's section 280A in the IRS code, by the way.
I'm so proud of your nerdiness today.
You bring out the best in me, Michelle.
I think that's the thing to remember. Like,
A disclaimer, asterisk, I'm not an accountant. Don't do this without consulting your professionals. I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express. That's it.
Oh, we should totally put that caveat on there. We are not
Accountants. This is not professional advice. This is opinion. You should consult everything that we say with a professional that has a license for this.
Exactly. No, but I'm going to show my nerdiness now. So data in equals data out. So you can have the greatest accountant ever, but if you're not putting the right data in, if you're not tracking the right information, they can't help you get all the deductions that you potentially could have access to. So we talked about using Google Drive for receipts. If you're really like, I don't even know if I could handle Google Drive, take a picture and email it to yourself and use email folders. I think there's just so many different ways to keep that separate. And then you have the option of putting it, you can go really old school and use spreadsheets. I would not do that, but I mean, it's better than handing them a bunch of receipts. Or you could use QuickBooks, Xero. There's all kinds of programs for you to categorize. And I think the categorizing is extremely important depending on how deep you want to dive into your data. So obviously you can have categories like marketing, licensing fees, brokerage fees, all of that. And then you could even have subcategories by house. So you can see what you're spending per transaction. So you can have an idea of how to set up your budget per transaction. Because there's expenses that comes along with every transaction. Are you including that in your when you're like, okay, my average commission is, let's say, 9,000 per transaction. Okay, that's your gross commission. What's your net commission? What are you really taking home? What are you really earning after expenses? Are you considering that? You can't understand what your net is if you're not tracking your expenses by transaction. And then the big thing, like brokerage fees. So not every brokerage is created equally. And don't worry, I'm not going to dive into like pitching you on what brokerage is best. We all know that anyway. But really there's so many people that don't understand their what they're truly paying into their brokerage. So there are some flat fee models, there's transaction fees. So what is your split with your brokerage? Obviously, we all know what our split is. We all know if we have a cap or not. But once you cap, do you have an additional split on top of that? Do you have additional fees on top of that? What is your per transaction fee? What is your annual fees? Do you have like annual fees, franchising fees, monthly fees, all of that? You need to really have a good picture of what you're paying your brokerage. What we find is that a brokerage that may have fit you a few years ago, you might have outgrown them. If your volume, as your volume increases, maybe their model isn't what's most like financially beneficial for you. How are you going to know that if you're not keeping track of all of those expenses as a whole and really looking at what you're spending? So I think breaking down by paycheck, by commission check, you're going to know obviously like what your expenses are. Usually your splits, your transaction fees, all of that are on there, but also thinking about the things that you are paying for out of pocket, and the things that you're getting bills for here and there with your MLS fees, your dues, your franchising fees, all of those extra expenses that are going to come in. So you can really look at your business and say, what is my cost of doing business? And is this the right model for me? And then obviously, if you're keeping track of your by transaction, that also allows you the ability to understand if you need to adjust your commission splits up or down, if you need to, what you should be charging for broker admin fees. So I understand not everybody on this call is going to have the same model. Some brokerages, you just charge a flat broker admin fee and they take care of certain things. Some brokerages, you have the flexibility to charge above what your broker requires, or you have the flexibility to, like, your broker doesn't charge anything and you have the flexibility to charge what you want. So really looking in those broker admin fees, and are you getting your expenses covered through your commission and your broker admin fee? And if you break it down by the average per hour that you're spending on a transaction, what's your hourly pay actually look like? Is it, if you're looking at things and you're like, by the time I break everything down and I pull out my expenses, I'm making $20 or $40 an hour, you're probably probably needing to adjust some things big time. You need to make sure that your time is worth it and that you're making more than you could if you were, working a W-2 job. You have the potential to make so much more than that. But if you're not measuring it, you're not going to know what you're truly making. And then I thought it'd be fun too, while we're chatting about it, to talk about some of the fun things that are deductions. So again, caveat, we are not tax accountants, but here's some things that we do pay for out of our business that have the potential to be tax deduction. So there's obvious things like your car payment. Depending on if you're leasing or buying, if you're doing your car payment or mileage, all of your gas, all of your mechanical, like your oil changes, those kind of things. Got to, need new tires on your car, insurance, anything related to auto. I'm billing that paying for that on my business card for not my personal, for my automobile that I use for business. You do need to make sure you're tracking mileage and all of that, because there are some adjustments that are made based on how much you use your vehicle for business versus personal. But that can be very, very significant, especially for us that do put a lot of miles on our car every year.
What
Cell
do you use
phone.
to track your miles?
So for me personally, this is not really probably the most effective way. I just use a spreadsheet and I I use Google Maps and figure out behind the scenes. And
How
I've
long?
tracked my miles for long enough that I don't have to track them. And like you establish a baseline, so you don't have to track them every month of the year. You only have to do it for a couple months, and then you have your baseline that the accountant can use for your
Yeah,
percentage
I
splits.
I use Ramil put in my like you. I use my like
Yeah,
you as well.
yeah,
It's super cheap for the year. It's like $50 or like $5 a month.
yeah,
And it automatically will at every day it'll pop up and say, "Hey, do you want to categorize your drives?" And you're just swiping left or right. And if you
mhm,
categorize a certain drive consistently, it'll ask you, "Hey, do you always want to mark this as a business drive?" And you go, "Yeah." And then all of a sudden, at the end of the year, you're only really categorizing a few drives a day.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I used to use an app. I had trouble, and I'm sure technology has changed, and this is why I'm still antiquated. I had trouble because I was driving my kids everywhere, and it was like I was having all this mix of stuff, and I'm like, it's just easier for me in my brain to be able to be like, this was the drive I had, and this was personal, this is business. But yeah, I don't know, I've gotten bad
But did
habits.
those happen in between when you were at the office and go into your next appointment?
Ah, good point. Good
Because
point.
your accountant would ask you if it was, and if so, that could be a qualified deduction.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good point, Matt, right? A lot of times what we assume is personal has a business spin to it. And so you just really have to think about what you're doing. And is it business related and could it potentially be a business deduction? That's a really good point. Let's see, coffee dates, lunch dates. You're having conversations with other realtors, other clients, anything that's business related, business conversations. You're not, I mean, there's different splits. Like your full meal's not going to be deductible. All your personal meals aren't going to be deductible if you wanted to charge and go out to eat every single day by yourself. But there are a lot of business conversations that we have. We have, I don't know about you guys. I'm at the coffee shop a lot talking to other agents, and those things are all tax deductible, and you should be keeping track of that. I always keep track of my receipt and then can make the decision later if I feel like, it was something that was related or not. If you do a lot of things with meals and coffee dates and those kind of things, just make sure that you're tracking to some extent. Like if you were ever to get audited, just write on your receipt, like lunch with XYZ agent or, something so that you would remember what that conversation was about and could support that it was about business. Obviously, anything marketing. If you buy anything with a logo on it, with your broker logo on it, like even if you're just wanting polos, workout gear, anything with your own business logo on it, anything, I mean, that is marketing. So buy all your clothes branded. You can use all of that, but anything that has your logo on it is really branded. It is considered marketing, as well as client gifts. There's a limit to how much you can spend and deduct on client gifts, but if you get things that have logos on them, that's considered marketing, and so you can exceed the amount that you are allowed. Is it still $25? I think.
I think it went up to 50.
Okay,
But
so
I'm
you
not,
can
again,
exceed.
I'm not an accountant. Don't ask me.
So yeah, so sometimes throwing in things that are branded, ordering things that are branded can help you justify being above that amount because it's considered marketing versus a gift. So yeah, that's
I would just add one thing to this, right? Is that put yourself into rooms where people are talking about things that are outside of your purview at the moment. We went to the Fast Forward Mastermind, and Kyle Whistle was our last speaker, and he talked about 7 tax strategies for the wealthy. And he showed us on the screen how he was able to use a commercial property that he bought, that his business then owns, that his business is in, that pays rent to him. And he was able to do a cost segregation on it and reduce his taxable income by $800,000. So there's levels to this, obviously. Put yourself in the room where people are talking about some pretty big things. And then all of a sudden there's like a gravity to it. It'll pull you into a different way of thinking and a different way of operating. So everyone's like, oh, I don't want to make $1 million. I'll have to pay the taxes. Yeah, that would be a great problem to have. And then when you're making that, you can also buy a commercial property and then cost segregate it against all of that revenue and income. And then all of a sudden you're paying no taxes. Again, not an accountant.
yeah,
Don't
pretty.
don't just go out there buy a commercial building and be like, well, Matt said. I
Matt
did
said
not
I
say.
should go buy a Lamborghini and write that off as my
Put a logo on it. I put a logo on it.
Yeah.
Michelle said if I put a logo,
Put
if
a
I
logo
wrap my
on it.
Lambo.
I took a stamp. It has my logo on it. Yeah. No, I was at that mastermind too, the fast forward mastermind, and I sent probably 3 texts to my husband. Don't forget to ask the
is this even
accountant
real?
this. Don't forget to ask the accountant about this. So he was, yeah. I think he gets annoyed with me because I'm pretty much like, just ask. Just ask. We just need to know for sure. But I think the big moral of the story here is what you can't control what you don't track. So if your spending is out of control, how do you know how to scale back what if you're not tracking and understanding where you're spending things inconsistently? And then also, like, if it helps have those conversations with your accountant towards the end of the year where you're like, hey, I had a pretty good year. What's my tax burden going to look like? Do I need to be considering, maybe you pay for, like, I use Follow Up Boss. Like if I had a high tax burden, maybe I'm going to pay my next year's Follow Up Boss and it annually at the end of December, just so I can have one more expense to decrease that tax burden. So there's a lot of things that come into play that you can't ask those questions. You can't strategize if you aren't planning ahead of time.
Strategize.
It's strategery. So get strategic, plan your taxes. And then we're not going to have our workshop Wednesday calls again until the 8th because of the holidays that fall. But next, Audra's going to talk to you guys about running your business like a business from a time planning perspective. So exciting stuff.
January 8th.
Yeah.
Also, one little housekeeping thing, because of Zoom and the ability for people to break in and do nefarious
Do
activities.
horrible things on your Zoom.
Horrible things. We are going to lock down the CTC call. It's still free. It's still open to literally anyone, but it's going to be password protected, and we're going to send a new password out every week by an email. I just in the chat put a link to a Google form. Please, if you want to continue on this call in January, make sure you fill out that form so we've got your email address. I promise not to sell your email address. I'm not going to spam you. Just we're going to send you a weekly email with the password so that way you can get it for the week. We just want to keep everybody safe and not seeing scary things. So.
Last little reminder as well, make sure your Zoom profile is your name. If you come in as iPhone or something else, we're not going to let you in. I don't know what an iPhone is. Last time that happened, it was I'm still triggered.
I am gonna fix the permission. Sorry, Ramiel. I thought
Ramil, sorry, that's awkward. You're not allowed back. It's
you can't come in.
This is really weird now.
We'll fix those permissions.
Nobody else needed permission, just Ramil.
Just Ramil. It was just you. We'll put that link in the Facebook group too. So if you guys want to, if you didn't get a chance to copy it or you need to come back to it later, just go to the Facebook group and we'll have that link in there and Audra will get permissions.
It should work now too. So we should be good.
You have the power.
All right, y'all. Go start collecting those receipts.
All right. Have a good day, guys.
Later.